Hello everyone. This is week 4 of the last in the present set of painting dried and dead things from the garden. And I'm going to paint this week some teasels, some honesty and some poppy seed heads. These are some of my favourite subjects and I just love the colours that they have. I'm going to use similar colours for all three subjects, but try to vary the tones so that they don't all look exactly the same. And just for fun, I've probably put a little bit of gold and silver gouache on. So I'll talk to you as I go along. These are the colours that I'm going to use and hopefully stick to. We'll try. And I've done my drawing, and first of all I'm going to demonstrate the painting of some teasels. They look hugely complicated, I realise, but let's try and find an easier way to actually portray them. I've got a little selection of ones in front of me that I'm actually looking at. I will send photos of the subjects that I'm using today, so that if you can't find anything like this and you want to paint these things, then you can use my photos. But obviously have a look in your garden to see if you're inspired by painting something from there. I've masked off some of the little curly spiky bits, the leaves I guess, that have dried, and they dry into fantastic shapes. This one I will show you because it's amazing, and it is going to be complicated to portray, but at the same time I wanted to have a bit of a challenge with that to see how it worked. But obviously keep it simpler if you feel you don't want to go with something like that. I've masked off these leaves that are actually in front of the actual head of the teasel. Which means then I can put all the depth behind and keep the leaves nice and light. In fact, on that one, I haven't drawn all the outside leaves at all, but just masked the ones that are in front of the main head, and again on that one. And it's easier for me, in fact, to paint them without drawing first, but on that one I have actually drawn them because that's the complicated one, and I wanted to see how that worked out. But I think it might be easier, in fact, to just paint those leaves without drawing first, because it's difficult to follow a pencil line sometimes. So I'm putting down the lightest colour that I see in these teasel heads first, working quite wet and trying to keep it wet for the moment. And that was a raw sienna. I'm now going to pop some burnt sienna, on the top of that, dotting it in so that some of my light colour still shows through. Okay. So trying to build up those colours in a nice simple way. Then I'm going to go for some raw umber. So I'm looking for texture. And then I need to put some real darks in. So I'm going to use, on top of the raw umber, some ultramarine blue, which will turn a kind of lovely dark colour, but not be too harsh looking. So letting that just make its way into the light areas that I've put down. And of course, if you've got lots to do, you can vary the tones anyway. So on top of that, I'm going to just drop little touches of water with the point of my brush, not wet, really wet, but just damp, and let those colours mingle a little bit. But before it dries, I want to try to get some nice spiky bits going on. Can you see all these lovely long spiky things? So what I'm doing is pulling out the colours that I've actually just put down. I've masked off a few of the spiky areas as well, so that they will look light. And they get really quite tall at the top here. You can put a little bit of depth on your brush to a darker colour just to get a little bit of variety in those spikes and go in different directions. And as I said, I've actually masked off a few light ones within the centre, because obviously, and if I actually just at the moment try to pull out a few more, that might make the right marks for me. Okay, so I'm going to put in the outside leaves using my sword brush and a sort of mixture of some of the colours that I've already used, letting that brush do the work. And this is why I'm saying that I find it easier to actually not follow my pencil lines, but to just paint these shapes. But if you don't have the confidence to do that, do the drawing and follow them, follow your drawing, but at the same time, don't worry if you don't get the exact marks that you've made, because what you could do when it's dry is to just rub out your pencil lines. But that will give you a bit of an indication of where you want to go. Right, so back to the other brush, and let's do something about the stalk, which actually is stripy. So bring in some of those colours down I've put at the top there, remembering that it's watercolour, likes to be mixed with lots of water. Lots of different ways to portray these things really, but I find this a nice easy way and actually quite fun. Bit of warmth on top of there. I've got a dark side and I've got a light side, and that's a really thick stalk on that one because it's a heavy head, but some of the stalks actually get really quite narrow. Right, I'll do one more before I go on to the next plant. So, going lighter with my light colour this time. You may decide to use different colours, obviously, depending on what subject you're going to be looking at. Or in fact, if you did these, you could paint them different colours. They do tend to vary. The older they get, the lighter they seem to be. So keeping this one, because it's behind, slightly lighter, but using the same sort of colours as before. This is the blue on top of the two colours that I've just put down, the siennas. And I've mixed on my brush the raw umber and and the ultramarine blue to keep a bit of a difference going on there and a lighter. Make sure you go over your masking fluid because otherwise you will not get the marks showing up that you actually want. Right, now let me see if I can... Which one was it that I was doing there? Right, very curly leaves to cope with. So here we go. 1, 2. I don't think they have the same amount on each one. Some get broken off anyway, so you can do whatever you feel looks right in your picture in many ways. And there's a curly one that's come right around like that. So while that's still wet, I'm just dropping a little bit of depth on the top of what I've already painted here. But try not to overwork. Let that brush do the work for you. Maybe try not to let it get too wet. Bit of depth at the base here. And now I need to pull out those spikes. They bunch up at the top here. This is the fun bit. But make sure you keep your brush upright so that the tip is the only thing that's touching the paper and you're getting nice marks. If it all goes a bit pear-shaped sometimes, don't worry. You've got your nice little sponge or your eradicator brush to actually change it if you need to. Right, so that one looks completely different to that one, which is no bad thing. While that's still damp, I'm just popping a little bit more depth one side on this one. Then I've got a lighter and a dark side going on all the way through my picture. Right, stalk, and then leave those to dry, and then I can show you again what we've got. You never know exactly what your pictures are going to look like until they dry, so don't judge too soon. Don't try and change things too much until you've had a look. These are quite free and easy pictures, I think, to paint, and quite forgiving in many ways. So there's just one more to do on there, but I'll maybe do that one later because I've got other things to show you. But to bring this one forward, when I paint it, I'm putting a little bit more depth behind there, both sides. That'll help to bring that forward when I paint it. Right, so I'll put that to one side and stop and get ready to paint the next subject. Right. I now have some poppy seed heads sitting in front of me, and I have to say I think they're rather beautiful. Beautiful colours. There's a sort of grey, blue, some of them really look very blue. So again, I'm going to use the colours that I've already shown you and used before, and put down first of all a little wash of the raw sienna. You could also, if you didn't want it to look quite so bright, you could use, what should we say, yellow ochre maybe is a cooler colour, which you could use instead. I would normally soften my pencil lines, but I wanted to see what I'm doing, so I've left them. But on top of my raw sienna, I'm just dropping some of the ultramarine blue They've got quite a smooth edge, and the colour, the grey colour, doesn't really go down into the stalks very far. So that actually gets a little bit darker in here. And there's also a little bit of warmth. They're all a bit different to each other, but similar colours. A little bit of warmth in there as well. I don't see an awful lot of necessity to drop water back in, but I have a little bit just to get darks and lights showing fairly naturally. And I'll go back to that in a minute and paint the rest of it and put some depth in. But I think I'll get them all to that sort of stage before finishing them off. Try not to make them all look the same, and if you draw them, make sure that you give them variety when you actually create your drawing in the first place, which is going to help a lot. A bit more depth in that one, so I've used a little bit of Payne's Grey. And they've each got a kind of veining going on, which I'll actually put in when they're just slightly drier. So I'm keeping an eye on what's going on up there, because I prefer it not to be completely dry. Now, I've purposely painted or drawn just 4 of them rather than an odd number, because I want you to see that if you overlap a couple of flowers or whatever you're drawing, a couple of things overlapping in the focal point, will look really good, but also it means that you don't have to have an odd number, because it kind of counts as one and it's looking balanced without having to think about the odd number situation. So that's why I did that. I think overlapping in any of these things is always going to look good, because it gives depth and perspective to your pictures. Nice thing happening there actually. So I'll keep this one slightly lighter behind. But here's the focal point. So all of your pictures should have a focal point. Try to begin with your focal point and work out from it. Right, while that's still damp but not completely dry, I'm going to give it a little bit of the veins showing. And it's dark, dark, dark in there. You can always soften those marks that you're making if you feel that you've overdone it. Don't really like drawn lines, so I do tend to use that softening technique quite a bit. And then dark, really dark little areas inside there where the seeds are going to be sitting. Right, so now it gets warmer, the colour gets warmer on the little top frilly bit. fantastic. So I'm indicating what I see without getting too detailed and concentrating too much on the detail, but just indicating what I see there in a nice sort of watercolour way. I'm trying to vary these things a little bit more than I had. There we go. They also have some sort of stripy marks inside that top lid, but I'll go back and do that in a minute. Definitely have a little warmer marking there and here. Fantastic shapes. And then just popping in another little layer here and there while it's still damp if necessary, and just popping in then the stalks, which dry up all bent and wobbly, which is nice. You could very possibly find some of these in the hedgerows. And make a nice little picture of them. So a bit of warmth down one side of them, perhaps here and there. Just try not to allow your stalk to get too monotonous. Make sure that you vary everything a little bit, which always gives nice interest to your pictures. Right, all I've got to do now is to put in a little bit of depth inside there. A few markings on here. Still damp, so it's actually softening as I paint it, which is quite nice. A mark there. Okay, so I can go back to those and pop in those sort of veining shapes, which are quite significant really on all of them. And allow it then to dry and go back and touch up a bit later. So I'll stop now, get ready for the next one. I now have some honesty sitting in front of me, and this is showing you what they end up like when they're outside and dried, and completely different to look at to when they're actually alive and kicking. Beautiful colours in them, and when you peel off this outer area you end up with a lovely silvery, very, very pretty little inside area. So I'll try to do a mixture of both on my picture. I've drawn it, and as you see, quite a lot of overlapping again, which was hopefully going to help. and using similar colours again. Definitely see the lovely warm raw sienna in the base here. So popping that down first, nice and light. They have holes in them, and you can also see in some of them the little seeds sitting inside. So I'm going to use a similar technique, there's a hole there, similar technique to when I painted the teasels, leaving some of this nice light colour showing through, but also going just over the edge onto dry paper with my darker colour, not necessarily drawing a line, but just taking the colour onto the dry paper in the hope that it will show the fact that each one has a little sort of dark surround. Now just a little bit of burnt sienna on here, and a little bit of the blue again. That ultramarine blue with these browns is such a good colour to use. And each one has a little spiky bit at the top. So just one stroke and you should get that. Again, you can drop little touches of water on if you want to try to mingle those colours a bit, but I'm going to leave that and see what I get when it's dry. And I won't put the seeds in because they're quite definite shapes underneath. I'll put those in when it's actually drier. So there's another broken one here. They withstand the weather pretty well, but they do eventually tend to, when they're dry, start to break up. So look for variety again. Taking that light colour around the edge. You have to be so careful about surrounding anything with a line. So doing it while it's damp, just going onto that dry paper makes that edge look a lot more natural than if you'd painted that when it's completely dry. Some sepia as well on this one, getting it quite dark over here. Trying also, I think, to leave some white paper showing through, because there are some really light areas, or at least letting that light colour that's underneath show through. So that's my broken one. One more like that, I think. I'm not totally following what I've got in front of me, but similar. You can see some seeds through there, which I'll put in on the top in a minute in a dark way. Sepia. And all the little spiky bits look quite dark in colour, which is good. They'll show up nicely. So now I can put a couple of these seed heads, little seeds that I show, that I can see showing through. I often end up making these look like faces without realising it. So I've gone for just 2. If I put 3 on, they'll most definitely end up looking like a face. I've done it numerous times. And that one behind will be lighter. Now I just want to do a couple that have got the outer bits peeled off. And I've got some silver gouache here, which I'm going to see if that will make a lovely shiny, sparkly colour for me. It's kind of grey, which is nice. Silvery grey colour. A little bit of warmth over the top here and there. Not a lot. But there is an edge to contend with. Keeping that brush upright a bit more. There's the spiky thing. Very pretty. Popping in little bits of shadow. And then if I put a dark one behind, there's a little tiny one here that's sitting behind. It's going to make those show up nicely and give some depth to the whole thing. So again, I'll put another little dark one behind here. I think this could make a Christmassy picture really with the silver and gold colours. Let's put some gold on here. There we are. But definitely the blue. Yeah, that's going to dry up okay, so I'm not touching it anymore. So just remember that you don't always have to keep on touching and touching. I think I'll put one more light one behind there. And then we'll have a look and see what we've got with everything else that's hopefully dried by now. Right, so nice opportunity to get your gold and silver gouache out. Or you can just leave these light, let the paper show through if you don't want to or haven't got the gouache. Right, I could, I think, put more work into those, but I'm going to leave them for now, I think, and see what anything else is looking like now that it's a bit drier. Right, I don't think I need to do anything else to those before I take the masking off. Maybe just a few more spiky bits this side, because this is my dark side. But I'll stop, take the masking off, and we'll see what we have ended up with. Okay, so everything has dried and still looking reasonably okay. I haven't done very much to anything. Apart from on this one, I've taken off the masking fluid, so it looks a bit odd now. So I need to go back in and create the spiky leaves that are actually in front of the teasel. Leaving some light in them if you need to with white paper. I think it always helps. This one was amazing. It just had a really big curl in it and it came around like this. So a bit more fun here putting these in. But you don't have to do anything as complicated as this unless you're up for the challenge. Beginners, keep it simple. Those of you who've done things like this before, maybe up the ante and try to challenge yourselves a little bit more with things from the garden. These things are quite forgiving, so you know you can put yourself into them quite happily. Right, I think that's all of those. So that really was a complicated one, but it's looking okay. And this one just had a couple of ones in front and a few light spikes that I'd put in with the masking fluid, which you can just colour lightly or leave. Not much on this one. Just the little bits that are still a bit wet there were in front. So you don't have to mask the whole thing. You don't have to mask all of those. Didn't need to do that. You don't need to mask all of those leaves. So just maybe use your sword brush to get the shapes that you need, which actually is a lot easier in my opinion. So that's the teasels. They look okay. Haven't done anything to these at all. Don't really need to, I don't think. They look fine. They've dried up well. But you could go in and put some splattering on. You could put some pen work over the top if you feel you'd like to. There are other techniques that you can use painting these things. So just try to remember what it is that you might need and what would look right in your subject. Haven't done anything to those apart from putting these little marks in that I'd forgotten about. They have these little T-shaped, I don't know if they're seeds as well. I'm not sure what they are, but they have these little things going on in them, which look nice. So just got a few to finish off there on that one, and that's it. So that's all. What else was I going to show you? If you want to put a background in, that's fine, and make more of a picture of any of these, then do. That's got other colours into the background to create a more interesting painting. And again, maybe a long picture would look good. I quite like that. and using different colours, you know, brighter colours, colours that you don't actually see particularly in your subject, but you feel you might like to use. And again, use the gold and the silver, which I haven't used on all of them, but I could have done. Or make a painting, putting them all in. Maybe use one of your long pads and create a picture with either 2 or all 3 of those subjects in them, or a collection of stuff from your own garden. Okay, so that's really it. I've attached photos, as I've said, so feel free to use them if you would like to. But have a look in the garden and the hedgerows. You'll be surprised what you can find. Next week we'll be into January, can't believe it, and beginning a new set, and we'll be working on still life subjects, which could include some of these things as well, all sorts of different things, and the world's our oyster with still life paintings, so things that appeal to you can be put together and make a little story and a nice still life, and so that's what we'll be doing in January. So wishing you all a very happy and a healthy new year, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Bye.